After more than 10 years in power, the Conservative Party, under Boris Johnson, are finally fighting back in the culture wars. When the likes of the former head of the poorly selling and barely read Guardian, Alan Rusbridger, now principal of an Oxford college, gets his knickers in a twist over the moves announced by the government over the last week, you know positive change is coming. And my friends, allow me to shower you in positive news during these incredibly miserable times. It looks like we're in for one hell of a winter. So first up, we've got the former editor of The Spectator and The Daily Telegraph, Charles Moore. He's tipped to become chairman of the BBC. Lord Moore, as head of the BBC board, which is responsible for maintaining the public broadcaster's independence and staying on mission, Moore referred to the licence fee as the most regressive and most ruthlessly collected of all government imposts. And interestingly, folks, we're often told that the BBC isn't biased towards the left. So why then, in the pages of the Times, are its staff threatening to leave if Charles Moore is appointed as the chairman of the corporation? Makes you think, eh? And then we have Paul Dacre, the former long-standing editor of the Daily Mail. He's understood to be the Prime Minister's favoured choice to become chairman of Ofcom. The Daily Telegraph reports that the Fleet Street veteran would want to rein in the BBC, forcing it to downsize and focus on its core public service responsibilities. So could we finally get a BBC that's more in touch with the public that it purports to represent? I won't hold my breath. But this is welcome news. There should be a reversal of the 300 new bodies of quangos and bureaucrats that Tony Blair and Alistair Campbell stuffed full of EU-loving ultra-liberals on six-figure salaries. 10 years after Labour was last in power, there are still 50% more Labour-supporting quango chiefs than those that back the Tories. It's time to address that balance. And I noticed that at the end of this year, the Electoral Commission needs a new chairman. And I'm telling you now, I would selflessly sacrifice my time to take up the role. Next up in the good news agenda, we've got Culture Secretary Oliver Dowden's warning in the weekend's press. The Daily Mail reports that the British Museum says it has no intention of removing controversial objects from display, after it received a warning letter from the government over the issue. In a leaked letter, Culture Secretary Oliver Dowden said that the government-funded museums and galleries risk losing taxpayer support if they remove artefacts. The missive, sent to several institutions, said, "As publicly funded bodies, you should not be taking actions motivated by activism or politics." And this, my friends, is important because it's a warning that if our taxpayer-funded institutions and museums attempt to rewrite our history, to destroy and denigrate our nation's past, then they simply cannot expect to receive any more from the taxpayer slush fund. And that's absolutely the right call. And at a time when our war heroes are denigrated at the cenotaph, for example, our patriotic songs at Last Night at the Proms and anthems are seen as too controversial to be sung, and landmarks like Churchill's home are under reviews by the likes of the National Trust, it's excellent news that the Tories are finally fighting back on this. And then there was International Trade Secretary and Equalities Minister Liz Truss's announcement that whilst yes, the process for trans men and women will be made kinder, simpler and cheaper, the government won't back the controversial self-ID reforms that J.K. Rowling and others have railed against, and received much backlash for doing so by a really vocal activist minority. The reforms would mean that those who identify as women can access sex-segregated spaces. There's also a review into gender identity services for children and young people. The review of the Gender Identity Development Service for children and adolescents, which is managed by the Tavistock and Portman NHS Foundation Trust in London, that'll assess issues surrounding children and young people who are prescribed puberty blocking and cross-sex hormone drugs. The review's going to examine the rise in the number of children in the UK seeking treatment. That's gone up from 77 kids in 2009 to 2,590 in 2018 to 2019. And in my view, this review kind of come a moment too soon. This is real common sense stuff. If kids aren't old enough to decide whether or not they can get a tattoo, why on earth would we let them take a course of generally irreversible hormone treatments? Doesn't make sense to me. And I'm pleased that, one, the government have rejected self-ID, which render the term woman useless, and same-sex relationships, by the way. If there's no such thing as biological sex anymore, there's no such thing as same-sex attraction. Words have meaning. They really do. In law, in life, it really matters. So these are good moves. And finally, the Department for Education under Gavin Williamson has issued guidance that finally fights back against the indoctrination of our nation's young. New guidance issued last week makes clear that our teachers shouldn't be using material that contain extreme political stances. So it says that extreme political stances include, but are not limited to, a publicly stated desire to abolish or overthrow democracy, capitalism, or to end free and fair elections. That means that the third parties that are putting forward lessons, plans, and advocating the overthrow of our system, Marxist ideas, and basically Corbynism on steroids, can't be pushed in our schools. The guidance also sets out a requirement to explain the harm caused by cancel culture and the importance of freedom of speech and freedom of association to a tolerant and free society such as ours, as well as an explainer on the harm that censorship and no platforming do to society. Our kids will have to learn about getting people cancelled and that being a form of bullying and not being acceptable. This is brilliant stuff. There was also material that puts to bed the influence of charities, like the pro-hormone blockers for our kids' outfit mermaids, when it comes to our schools. That specific guidance reads that materials which suggest that non-conformity to gender stereotypes should be seen as synonymous with having a different gender identity should not be used, and you should not work with external agencies or organisations that produce such material. This is brilliant news. You know, suddenly kids aren't going to be confused by being told that they're in the wrong body, or that capitalism is an inherently evil thing. It's all good stuff. Finally, and maybe, just maybe, the Conservatives are taking the long march through the institution seriously. And maybe, just maybe, we might stand a chance against those who do not wish our nation well. The Tories have got this 80-seat majority. It's about time they used it. I'm pleased to see that they are. You know, Lawrence Fox is waiting in the wings if they don't take this more seriously and continue down this trajectory with his new political party. But this is good stuff. I'm happy. Let me know in the comments if you're happy as well, and consider supporting Reasoned on our GoFundMe page if you're able to do so. Thank you very much. I'm Darren Grimes for Reasoned UK.